It's a philosophy of going the extra mile. It's the do unto others. It's part of our mission statement is to follow the golden rule, and that really breaks down to treating other people as you want to be treated, giving the kind of service that you want to give. People don't talk about average service. People only talk about really great service or really lousy service. We want our customers to talk about us, but we want them to talk about us, our great service. That's what we're trying to get them to talk about. Average service, nobody talks about. We want them to talk about our great service. And we do a lot of things. Our employees look for ways to kind of go over the top. And in this company, they're rewarded when they do that. I hope there's hundreds of examples out there, and I hope there are 100 more still to come.
Good afternoon. Can we ask everyone to please rise? We would like to introduce Reverend Jill Lane with the Paramount Baptist Church, who will give our invocation.
Okay, let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity you've given us to speak to you, Creator of all things and God of all, and we are so blessed to be able to share our concerns, to praise you, to honor you. Lord, you told us in your word to pray for our leaders, and Lord, we do. We thank you for those who have been chosen to serve, who have stepped up and willing to serve, and Lord, we ask that you would guide them and direct them and help us as we are a part of this whole process called government. We want to thank you for that, but also we ask your wisdom. We ask that you would lead us every step of the way to do the right thing and what's best concerning the city that you blessed us with and in which we live. We pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, God. You all would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good afternoon and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Amarillo City Commission, held this Tuesday at 3 p.m. on the third floor of City Hall. The first item of business on today's agenda is the approval of the minutes. Those minutes regarding the meeting held on August 20th, 2013. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? Not an entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of the minutes as presented.
Second. A motion and a second for the minutes as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Next item of business is a public hearing on a tax increase. The City of Amarillo is considering a tax rate of 0.34009, which is greater than the current rate. This proposed rate will raise more taxes than last year's tax rate. The tax rate will effectively be raised by 7.89%. The tax on the average home last year was $363.45. The tax on an average home would be $385.51 under the proposed rate. And we will begin with public comment about this. If you have a public comment about this regarding the hearing about the tax. Now, and I welcome you to come on up. This just really establishes the beginning of the discussion where it's more formalized. We will not take action on this today, correct?
Correct, Mayor.
So we want to hear input on this, and certainly we'll have discussion points too. We'd like to begin. I don't see anybody rising quickly, but Mr. City Manager, you might explain some of what things are there. From my standpoint, the things that I thought were significant as we talked about this, maybe other commissioners would comment. Certainly we did have an increase in sales tax, and we've calculated what that can do in certain areas of the budget. But then we also realized that to have any catch-up on the number of police in our city, we are incrementally adding 3, I think, to the standard budget without an increase. And we're saying that if we could add 10, that basically takes a penny of taxes to add 10. One of the reasons that's important that it comes through a tax increase is because it has to be sustained for the career of those people. We want to have sustenance to hire them and keep them. It would take some capital expenditure, but the primary expense, and correct me if I'm wrong, the primary expense that continues, of course, their salaries and benefits and employment and retirement, everything else that's entailed with the 10 more people. That number would bring us up, I think we were at 1.71 per thousand, and the average or the standard in the nation is sort of a 2 per thousand people. This would raise it slightly. I think it was 1.76. I have to look back at the numbers. But we still would be adding 10 policemen beyond what we had in the regular budget. We would still be 33 short of the 2 per thousand national average. So we were 43 down. After adding 3, we're still 43 short of the average. And this would add 10 more, which would make us 33 short of the national average. As we talked to the police chief, the things that he said were becoming difficult is detective work, and so they may be able to respond quickly, but follow-up work takes longer because there's not enough people to get out and do the follow-up work in all cases to respond quickly to follow-up work. Makes a backlog. I think all of us wanted to discuss that. Do you have any comments about that particularly?
Particularly related to the additional police?
Certainly,
Mayor, be glad to. The goal, the national standard of the 2 per thousand is pretty well documented and based on how do you accommodate, number one, calls for service and respond in a timely manner to your calls for service. And then secondarily, how do you follow up on those? So you've already discussed well follow-up. I think one of the issues we continue to face here in Amarillo is that the population is growing, has grown significantly. And historically, we've not been able to add officers in a big enough number at a time to try to move us towards that 2 per thousand, to get those response times, to get that follow-up, and to get that where we want. As an example, the base budget did include 3 officers for the police department. About 2.5 of those are necessary merely to accommodate the growth year to year. So 2.5 of them don't actually count towards changing that ratio. Certainly the proposal put forth by the City Commission to take those 3 that are in the base budget plus an additional 10 does move you, and I believe it takes you up closer to 1.8.
Let me correct my memory. I pulled the sheet, and what it was we were at 1.76 per thousand. With the 3 additional in the budget, we're at 1.77. With the 13 additional, or 3 in the budget and 10 extra from the spending, we're at 1.82 per thousand.
Right, and then that's going to be significant progress, and we certainly appreciate that. Did you want me to just run through a quick summary, or at least as quick as I could?
That'd be great.
Okay, I'd be glad to do that. This budget brings forth what I consider to be major improvements in public safety aspects of Amarillo. For the fire department, this is the addition of 8 positions. These 8 positions go with the 7 that we added last year. Collectively, that finishes the required staffing for the second engine company at the new fire station 13. So station 13 will open here probably within the next 45 days. Once we bring these additional folks on and complete the promotions, the second set of engines at that station will be fully staffed, and you will have added your 3rd hub to the fire protection system in Amarillo. The first, of course, is the downtown station. The second is Station 7 over on Amarillo Boulevard, and then this new Station 13.
Can I just clarify as you're going along that this is the budget without a tax increase? This is the current.
This is the base budget.
This is the base budget with the current tax rate.
Good point. Doing so, the fire department completes the certificate of obligation projects that were initially funded in 2007. That has produced tremendous benefits to our capabilities here in Amarillo. This will finish and close that out. We are also making a major step forward in addressing the service life that we expect of those fire vehicles. They've traditionally been programmed as 15-year lifespans. In fact, it's rare that we can get 15 years out of one. So we're resetting the funding in all cases to 14 years, and in the third of the fleet down to 13 years, and I think we'll be getting close to where we need to be. Police, we are in the base budget bringing forth 3. We're providing additional funding for the police department for those administrative support, those back office type of deals, and that's to help cover the growth that this commission largely has been able to give us in the last couple of years. Animal control is a net 3 for animal control officers. These are the people on the streets. We're not buying new trucks. We're staffing our existing fleet for greater periods of service or coverage. What that does in your general fund, we're adding a net 16 positions. 14 of those are public safety positions. The budget pushes forward on your efforts to maintain Amarillo's financial status. You do have an outstanding financial condition and position. You continue to address the future liabilities of Amarillo, the unfunded accrued actuarial liabilities. This includes your TMRS pension, which is the base pension for your employees. Very proud that with this commission's efforts, you've brought that up well over 90% funded ratio. That's funded at probably a higher ratio than any other public pension that you can find. We continue to improve the status of the firefighters' pension and relief fund. That's a standalone pension approved by Amarillo voters in the 1950s. And we're addressing the future liabilities in your health plan. All of those are going well. And we have significant detail. We probably want to hold those till we get to the budget hearings, but we do have that. The base budget was the 32-cent tax rate at 32 cents. That's actually 1/2 of 1 penny over what would be your effective rate. Water and wastewater, we're looking at a 2% increase. That covers the new Water Development Board funded projects. You recently approved an application where we asked for a nominal amount from the Water Development Board to start projects, and they instead said, no, we think y'all are doing well. You've done well on 2 large projects. Please take all the rest of the funding. So we're doing that. Landfill, $1 increase per ton for trash coming across the scale. This does not affect your residential haulers. This is pretty much going to be commercial outfits that bring their stuff directly to the landfill. 70-cent increase in residential solid waste. Building safety, there's 1 increase to the general contractor fee. What that does is actually put the general contractors on parity with all of the subs that they already use and are already paying. Library, increase of $3 in the out-of-city library fee. A large number of our library users do not live in Amarillo, thus do not contribute through your property tax. For the first time since it opened, we would like to adjust the fees at the tennis center. You're on South Bell Street, so we're asking for a sum total of a 50-cent increase for that. Would point out that you do have major expenses that are beyond your control that are coming up. Primary among those is utility cost, and I'll just use the general fund as an example. You're expected to have a $325,000 increase in just the gas and electric bills to the general fund. Some things internally, we will make our first payment to the federal government of just slightly over $300,000 for having our health insurance plan. So we'll make that January 1. That's an increase above and beyond. We'll add some money from the general fund on top of that, as well as increasing both the employee and the employer payments. We're making major progress with your fleet. We're bringing those up by about 7%. And Mayor, I think you pointed out several times, that's us catching up for some of the slow years that we had back in 2009, 2010. We've talked about your general fund, a few other things to point out. We are adding an inspect-trains driver. We've done that the last 2 years. We'll continue to do that. The demand in that field just continues to grow, and we need to meet it. We're adding an additional project inspector from the engineering group. That's in addition to 1 that we added mid-year this year. Primary duties will be to supervise actual construction projects for streets and for drainage. Kind of some selected highlights. Your hot tax continues to grow. We've had tremendous increases just in the last 2 years. The benefit of that is, number 1, your civic center, while it's within the general fund, your civic center is not supported by general fund revenues. It's supported by earned income and by the hot tax.
Let's describe for everyone hot tax.
hotel occupancy tax. So it's the add-on on your hotel bill. And at least in the case of the hot tax that we receive in Amarillo, if you're not spending the night in an Amarillo hotel, you're probably not contributing to that. But it's been very, very successful for us. Provides capital money for the Civic Center, support for the downtown projects, support for your Convention and Visitors Council, which is perpetual. If we increase what they do more of it, more people stay, more revenue, more ability to do things for the city. In the street department, we are adding an additional asphalt repair crew and equipment. This is the first time that we have done that in many, many years. We're only having to buy the new equipment. We're going to convert existing positions so that we can staff new equipment with existing people. It's well needed. I think the mayor's pointed out many times the growth in our street networks. We're adding an additional side loading truck. That's for residential solid waste. That also ties back to that 70 cents across that. Your budget this year, the base budget brought forth, I consider to be very successful in terms of your capital. You were able to generate, and this is through sales tax and through additional revenues and through departments underspending their budgets each year. We generated about $8.55 million to use for our local capital. In the general fund, what that is, that's your streets, that's your parks, that's your city buildings. So those are those improvements owned by the city, provided to the residents that don't carry a separate revenue source with them. That's up over $2 million in 2 years, Mayor and Commission, so we're very pleased with that. We can go through that. There's a series of items that would be spent on. Probably the largest, $2.5 million to continue the arterial reconstruction programs, $600,000 to finish funding the reconstruction of 34th from Swansea to Coulter. Of course, the equipment we talked about that we would be adding for that asphalt repair crew. We'll try to finish the upgrades of all your school zone flasher systems, get those on a modern remote controlled system that we don't currently have deployed today. For Parks and Recreation, you're continuing your spray ground program. We're adding a spray ground this time at City View with general fund money and at East Ridge with community development funding. Playgrounds, other items. These are programmed improvements, and we're very pleased that for the last 3 years we've been able to take the top of each of those lists and address it and keep moving. Something new is the remodel of the city-owned building at 8th and Pierce. This would be the first general office expansion available to the city of Amarillo since this building opened in 1965. That will be, number one, a source for all the community development group to be in one place to serve their customers. And number two, all of our development-related divisions and departments will be in one place on one floor so that we can adequately serve and handle the needs for growth that we have in Amarillo and the needs for improvement of existing things. We have a large sidewalk improvement project that's funded out of what's called a street assessment fund. Amarillo's held that for years. It's time to start using it. $1.8 million for your annual overlay project. Assorted other items. Utilities division, this is water and wastewater. This is everything from the water well that pumps your water from treatment plants to getting it to your faucet and then taking it back and doing something with it once you give it back. That has continued to do very well. The Commission several years ago put a very good rate structure in place where as you progressively use more, you pay more. That's working. We're now up to generating about $14.5 million of local capital. That capital is used to maintain what we have, to fix the stuff that we have that's old. Those of us that have been here most of our lives often don't stop and think, I know I don't, how old stuff in Amarillo is. We have utilities in the ground that are approaching 90 years of age, and they don't last forever. So this is a way to handle that and to handle that on a non-debt basis. The airport will continue its traditional program. The local funding is going to go towards working on the outdoor parking lots, and then the FAA funding is predicted at about 3.2 this year. Your drainage utility program, about an $8.1 million capital plan. 2.1 of that's locally generated. $6 million is the second half of the bond that was identified in your original business plan. Your big projects this time will be $5 million at Martin Road. We need to get in and work on that lake. We need to get some structures out of the flood zone. When I say get them out of the flood zone, we're not moving the structures, we're modifying the lake so that we can modify where that flood zone is. We will also start the engineering on the T-Anchor project that we know is coming up. Mayor, in a very brief snapshot, that is your base budget being built on the 32 cents, and then the item under discussion is the proposed 34 cents, which came through as a result of the Mayor and Commission's review of this budget.
Okay. Any questions first by commissioners or any comments? If we have any comments from the audience about this, it'd be a good time to come up. And so, for those of you who haven't commented in the past, we would like to limit your comments to 3 minutes and ask you to please give your name and address as you begin. Thank you.
Robert Tolliver, 4400 Southwest 3rd Avenue in Amarillo. I'm curious about the increase on the property tax rate. How exactly are those funds going to be used, for one? And I'll go ahead and throw in my second question, if that's okay, instead of approaching the microphone 2 times and taking up 6 minutes. You had mentioned on the base budget that there was going to be a 50-cent increase at the tennis center, and I was wondering the reasoning behind that, and is there a prorated rate increase for those of us who like to take advantage of the senior discount, or is that going to be a straight 50-cent across the board increase for any and everyone? As an avid tennis player, even though I hurt a lot when I finish, it is of great interest to me, and believe that we should have adequate sports facilities like that to take care of people that aren't members of private clubs. As a matter of fact, it'd be nice to have 2 tennis centers for action. But if you could provide me a little insight on exactly how the property tax is going to be allocated, and a little more in-depth explanation about the tax at the tennis center, how that's going to be used, I would appreciate it very much.
Robert, maybe I can address some of that, and certainly refer some of it to, but we appreciate your comments. We are still in discussion about how we'll do that. When we set the tax rate, it was a maximum we'd go to, so a maximum of 2 cents higher. Our base budget is basically what Mr. Atkinson described. At the end of that discussion, which took several days, and we invited people to come. We had one lady that came through the whole thing. She was wonderful. And yet, when we got done, some commissioners asked, okay, that's the base budget. That's without increasing taxes, other than what the current rate is, which, you get into a discussion. It raises a little bit extra because we increased property value. But let's just say it stayed the same, 32.009. That's what it is now. So the discussion was from commissioners, how are we going to get ahead of the police department when we know we're lacking in that? And the discussion centered around, well, if we bid off 10 of those right now, and we added 10, it would take basically a penny tax to do that. So that discussion came about, and at the conclusion of that discussion, Commissioner Sims said, look, we are looking at other needs that we're not going to be able to avoid over a period of time. And he said, what would it do if we dealt with another penny? His discussion, personally in his mind, he couldn't be here today, but his discussion centered around employment benefits. And my reaction to that was, of course, the city manager will disseminate that with his team leaders about how he would do that. But certainly we know of areas where our employment is not, our pay may not be commensurate to what other competing areas are. And that would deal with things like fire and police and entry-level people. So that discussion was had, but not, my view is not to hamstring what the city manager makes a decision to do with that. We have to identify where we're short in needs and where that may be a problem. So that was the discussion was had, and that discussion is still going on. We had dissenting opinions in this commission about that. The other thing that I identified that I was very concerned about was, as we, and I had a personal experience with this at my job, we had 36 computers that all cascaded into failure one day, and we were basically shut down. We had to have a tremendous influx of people to come in and fix those. We didn't have the option of replacing them. We had to get in and get the data out of them. We have over 3,000, I believe, computers in the city of Amarillo. We saw in the budget items that those updates, the normal things we do, times at our home, times 3,000, what is going to come forth in the next few years to keep those secure, updated, efficient, operating, and replaced as they wear out? And they have a replacement pattern. My concern was, because of my personal experience, where we were told that we could have spent a tenth for monitoring, but now we had to spend 10 times that to come, and we had no choice. It was get in and fix it. In my mind, I'm picturing this catastrophic failure of computers if we don't look to identify what those needs are. And so my question was, okay, what are we going to do about that? We know it's coming in the next few years, each year, to have an expenditure. And the whole thing is sort of like the discussion we all had about streets. How do we stay ahead of the obvious needs that are ahead of our city as we grow and as we expand? And how do we do that? Now, many commissioners came back and questioned, yeah, but we've got these other streams that are new, like our hot tax is up, hotel motel tax. It comes from people that stay in our hotels. 90+% of it is people who don't live in Amarillo. Thank goodness they stop and stay and leave a little tax money with us. Sales tax, about 60% of which comes from people that don't live inside the city. They come from the region. What are we doing to spend that money, which is obviously increased? And in my mind, making my decision, each commissioner has their own decision to make. I saw exactly how those funds were spent on the base budget, which was your question, the base budget. And then what do we have to take care of needs that weren't taken care of in the base budget? My conclusion was we had to deal with the police. That's my personal view. My conclusion is that we have to stay on par with employment, especially entry level and fire and police, other things where competitively we know cities to the south that are still competitive with us have a higher entry wage. We saw that from those presentations. And then one of the things that I identified was we've got to begin to deal with the future needs of the computer. We're not talking about a Cadillac computer system either. We, from our deal, had on-time monitoring that kept up with those computers because we had this catastrophic failure. We're not talking about doing that. We're talking about our team of people monitoring very much as manually as you can. We're not, it's not going to be a Cadillac system, but we know we have to keep those computers humming. And while all of us distress over computers, none of us can avoid them. We're never more than a few feet from one of those devils now, and I don't know how to avoid that. So at any rate, for me, and maybe some other commissioners would like to add to that answer, because that is certainly the debate. Those questions are very good questions. They're absolutely the debate we're having now among ourselves to determine what the final action will be. And that's why the questions from the public, the questions you raise, are critical to us in making this decision. So thank you for your questions. Do you have any further questions about those?
Not at this time, but I would share one thing about computers with you.
Certainly.
Whenever I have difficulty with technology, my administrator hears me say some things that aren't quite so nice, and she sticks her head around the corner and says, "Bob, are you having a picnic in there again?" I come to discover picnic is problem in chair, not in computer.
I think that's probably true in my case too. Doug, before you leave, you asked a question about the tennis center, and I'd like to defer to the city manager to answer that.
Certainly, Mr. Rod Tweet, Rod is our parks director, and I'm going to have Rod speak to your question on the 50 cents, and is that ratable to the senior passes? That was the question?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Rod, if you would, please.
Just take a seat up close. You may have a response. You may have another question, please. Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. City Manager and Commissioners, yes, the 50-cent requested increase does pertain only to court rental fees, and that does include seniors. And that's a 90-minute court rental. It's either $1, $1.50, or $2, and we're going to $1.50, $2, or $2.50 per 90 minutes per individual on a 90-minute court rental.
How long have those prior rates been in effect?
Since we opened the tennis center. They have not been increased since.
12
Yeah, this puts us in, if you look at the region as far as tennis centers, that we're still a little low on our court fees. but puts us closer to probably average in this region for court fees. And certainly this helps us increase the quality which we give back to the customer, whether it be to help offset staffing in the pro shop or do some improvements out at the tennis center.
So about 50 cents for every 30 minutes.
For every 90-minute court rental, and that's per person.
Well, 50 cents for every 30 minutes. So you said $1.50 to rent it?
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
okay.
Great, thank you very much.
We have a comment from Commissioner Eads.
Just to kind of clarify a little bit, because I'm like to carve things up into simple. When we discussed the increase in tax rate, essentially three officers were added to the current tax rate. And there was a concern, as the mayor has really definitely outlined, that we need to increase more than that and consider getting up to what is our ultimate, closer to our ultimate goal. And so a penny increase in property tax rate would accomplish that goal. The second penny really was dedicated to across the board increases in employee pay rates. The city manager had built into that pay rate 2.75%, and there was the discussion that perhaps that should be 3.75%. And I think the mayor has made a very good point. I spent hours and hours this weekend pulling job listings off of Lubbock, San Angelo, Abilene. I've got all of this documentation. And let me tell you, when you go start to comparing Park Tech 1s with Park Tech 2s, and engineering front loader 1s with, it's very hard to compare apples to apples. It's very, very difficult. And it is true that in some ways our employees are paid better, and in some ways our employees are paid less. And so, I almost wonder if it doesn't require what we did several years ago, where we actually got someone to come in and look and see who was being paid fairly and who wasn't being paid fairly. Because when you look at this kind of an increase of 3.75%, for somebody making $7.25 an hour, $16,000 a year who's an entry-level employee in a park or whatnot, it's $500-600. For somebody who makes $100,000, it's, what would that be? $3,000, almost $4,000. And so, in as much as we have people out there in the community that, I know that this doesn't apply to anybody over 65 because they're on fixed incomes, but golly gee, we're kind of all on fixed incomes, it seems, these days. And that's what I would really have talked to my fellow commissioners about, respectfully, is that I'm wondering if we shouldn't zero in, since poverty is such an issue in this area and in the state of Texas, if we shouldn't focus in and see who it is who really needs the help. We're helping our employees admirably with their retirement plan. They are not paid as those are paid in the business community, but they somewhat make up for that with a really well-funded retirement plan. And for the average person who doesn't have catastrophic medical problems, our employees really do have first dollar health care coverage, because while they have a big deductible, they got the wonderful city care clinic they can go to. They're treated like family. And so that's what I have asked my fellow commissioners about, and I would like to continue that discussion. And I'll tell you, I would like to thank Mr. Atkinson for such a wonderful job of reviewing this budget, and you can go to sleep at night knowing that your tax dollars are being handled and treated respectfully. So that's all I'd like to say about that.
Well, and I think to add to that, so you know how we discuss this, obviously Commissioner Eads expressed those questions, and we weren't sure. My answer in my mind was somewhat set at ease about what we do with employees if we have this ability to increase them, because in 2009, they did not have any raise at all. And in 2010, the managers didn't have any raise. The base employees had a little bit of a raise. I'm not one to always tie that to COLA. I think that there's some other things you look at. Commissioner Eads alluded to some of those things. And we look at what the poverty level is here, we look at what our people are earning. But we also look at the dedication of our employees, and we see them doing things that are above and beyond, whether it be the snowstorm, whether it be a breakout on 9th Street, whether it be something that explodes with a water pipe that's ancient and can't be predicted, where they respond and protect us and take care of things. Those are the to me, the police and fire, we design that so they're there. But when we see a road grader operator risk his life to go in to protect us from fires on the western side of town, that happened a couple of years ago, the road grader got caught, had to get in a pond, had to call the fire chief at the emergency center and say, how do I survive this? The fire truck got separated, smoke too thick to see. He had the foresight to call. That's the kind of thing we get from our employees. This guy put on his blue jeans and his city shirt in the morning and ended up on a road grader being encompassed by fire. He had the foresight to take a plastic bag, put his phone in it, and go underwater while the fire passed over his head. Now that's one example of what happens on a daily basis. I get calls from citizens all the time, and they're not all complaints. I had one recently where somebody damaged a dumpster, pushed it into their fence, and without any inquiry, the city was out there taking care of the repairs quickly. They make mistakes. We all had the opportunity to go out to the service center and try and drive a dumpster. And when they told us that you have to pick over 400 dumpsters up, I don't think I qualify for that job, no matter what the pay was. In a day, they pick up over 400 and are expected not to damage anything, not to do whatever, thinking about overhead lines, thinking about other properties, thinking about type. I don't know how they do it. A lot of times in the dark. So at any rate, we have to be considerate of that. We are not decided on this. And maybe at this point,
Can I?
certainly.
I just want to reiterate that we're looking at that we're considering a tax rate of 34.2 cents, but that's only considering, and that's what these public hearings are for. And so we're going to have one this week and one next week. We won't vote for a couple of weeks. And if we raise the tax rate 2 cents on an average home in Amarillo, it's $22 a year increase. And so average home is $113,000. $113,356 is an average home these days. So, that's what we're here to talk about today. And 34 is the highest we can go. We don't have to do that.
Now, I think $22 is on a $100,000 valuation review. It's on 113.
On 113.
Thank you. Okay, excuse me. But they're all considerations we have to make, and while none of us want to see more taxes, all of us don't want to see less services. We're already so much lower than so many other areas. It's pretty phenomenal how the city's been able to do this for a period of time. We're 17 cents today under Lovett's.
To me, it boils down to a public safety issue. If you've been paying attention to news stories, the state has been releasing people from the state prisons if they're nonviolent offenders, and it's bleeding into our communities, and we're dealing with some of those issues. And now when the federal government is also going to be replicating that and letting nonviolent offenders and let them out of jail, well, somebody has to absorb that population that moves into communities they came from, or maybe just because they hear it's such a good place to live in Amarillo or whatever. So to me, it boils down to a public safety issue. I think all of us have been noting in the headlines that we've had a spike in crime in Amarillo of all sorts. And I would like to think that we're doing our job of protecting the citizens of Amarillo by having more peace officers on the street, more detectives to work the cases, etc. And when we're talking about salaries for employees and staff, we leave that up to the city manager to decide how that wants to be implemented. But if you're in business, you know that employee turnover is more costly than retaining the people that you have who do a good job for you. And so who doesn't want to work for more money? Everybody does. I mean, that's just human nature. But I think that we can address those issues by letting the city manager and his administrative team decide how to best do that. And I agree with the mayor that, it's not necessarily something that we want to get into the bushes with. We're not going to micromanage that process. But to me, that's what it boils down to. Cost of losing entry-level employees that cost you more to train, et cetera, in the future, and public safety for our community.
One of the other things that the police chief told us was they have seen this drop in prison population, but part of it is state prison, part of it is our local jails. And one of the reasons for that is when, in past times, when somebody was being arrested for not paying fines, maybe the fines were $300 or $1,000, they had to pay those immediately or go to jail and work it off. And the state has now mandated that we can't do that. Isn't this correct, Mr. City Attorney? We can't do that. We have to put them on a payment plan. And it's funny, some of those criminals don't pay. So then yeah, that's what we thought. So then the policemen get to go out and rearrest them, and only if they rearrest them can they then keep them for not doing that. So we get double work now because of some state mandates about how we deal with these people. That just makes a lot of sense to me. But I don't know how we deal with the other things. We've had some unbelievably dramatic crimes, and it's like these people are saying, catch me, because the police are catching them, but it's taken a huge effort to get them. You look at those, and 2 days later, they're caught. But it's still a tremendous amount of work that these people have to do. And our people are at risk. They can document times where somebody's been released on that Pay Me program, and then they rearrest them for crimes while they're back out. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're left with dealing with those mandates, and that's part of the reason, as Commissioner Escajedas talked about, we're concerned about public safety. And knowing that we're already under the average by 44 officers, which is more than 10% of our total staff that's on the streets every day. We're lower by 10%. This would still leave us 33 officers short of what we should be at by national standards. So, did you have a comment? Okay.
May I possibly make one comment?
Certainly, please.
Commissioner Green?
Certainly.
Take this off of your regular person. Commissioner Green, you mentioned the increase, and I believe you said $22 a year on a $100,000.
$113,000.
Yeah, $113,000. And that's a year, and that really is not much. However, that is an additional cost for the home and the property I reside on. And I know this is going to be a discussion at a later time, but when you add that to the drainage fee that's being proposed, that ends up being a considerable amount of money. And I would just like to leave you at this point with that, because it's more, there's more going on than just that.
Oh, and I didn't mean to insinuate that $22 was not a lot. I was just pointing out that was the figure.
Right, yeah. And I'm sorry, yes, sir.
We also noted that when we did the drainage fee, a sister city to the south of us is 10 times what our fee is. 10 times. And so obviously it's a concern, but we've got $66 million in documented projects that need done that we couldn't get to unless we did that. So if we revisit that, we certainly need to revisit the whole thing. We know that if there's property at risk, we know when there's a huge rainstorm, that we're going to get
Come to
multiple
West
calls.
Hills and you can
Well, we'd
swim.
love to have more. But we know that we're going to get 40 or 50 flooding calls from different parts of town, depending on where it hits. And so we understand, but we are so much lower than other cities. Another city south of us, of their taxes, 17 cents is debt service. Ours is 2 cents debt service. We're viewed by some pretty big experts as one of the best fiscally run cities in the country. We're one of 5 in the state, and I know people laugh about us touting this, but I'm pretty proud of it. 5 cities in the state of Texas have AAA bond ratings in general revenue and water and sewer bonds, and 28 out of 33,000 cities rated, 28 nationwide that have those bond ratings. Better than the federal government.
No kidding. Thank God we're not the federal government.
Thank goodness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Kirkwood. I thought I would be out of the political game for a while, but my community-mindedness kind of brings me back to maybe share
Give
something.
your address.
Oh, yeah. 933 West Bonita, Amarillo, Texas. I wanted to share with you about a group of people, and it kind of goes to the crime rate. It kind of goes to the need for police, and most of you probably know that I run Cornerstone Outreach Center. We have watched the number of people in need escalate drastically. I began that in 1996 here in Amarillo with small numbers This past year, we gave food and assistance to 26,300 different people. We're packed to the walls every Friday that we distribute baskets of food and everything. Most of these people are great citizens that are what I call the working poor. They're working. It's not that they're lazy. They're not determined to be homeless. There is an element of that, but it's a small element in our city. And they're becoming very desperate. Just before coming to this meeting, I was at the Walmart. There was a young lady standing there. She's probably about 28 years of age, maybe 30. And she was crying. And I thought, what is wrong? And I stopped there at the corner of the parking lot, and she said, she spoke very little English. She was an immigrant here to the U.S. from Romania, left a former communist country, and was here. And she said, I just need food for my 3 babies. She didn't want food for herself, for her 3 babies. Told her how she could get to our outreach center. But I see this. I remember growing up in this city, been here 50 years, and I've never seen a time where there's so many people standing on street corners holding up signs. And we're inundated with people in need. And while the tax rate increase that you're proposing is very small, keep in mind it's a chain reaction down to the people on the bottom. These people don't own homes, they rent. People with rental property, then they jack the rent up. It hits them. The next thing you know, they start becoming more desperate. I think it goes back to our crime rates. And in the county, I was there 12 years, and you guys have a tough job. I know you do. And I don't envy your job. But I just want to say that please consider before you do a tax increase that it affects these other people. 12 years I didn't vote for a tax increase. We were nearly broke when I went to the county. Nearly bankrupt. I left there, we had $20 million in reserve, and we renovated some big buildings. And it can be done, and it's a tough job. But please consider not increasing taxes because of those people at the bottom.
Commissioner, one of the things that I think is important to note is out of your total tax bill that you get with your property tax, 13% of that, I think, is what goes to the city. And some other portions are much larger for other entities, need to be. Not questioning that, just saying that is, we are cognizant of how fiscally careful we should be and how it does affect individuals. But we have the other side where we ask for the federal government to stay out of our business, but they stopped sending us money for citizen block grant funding. I know you're very aware of how that works. Very important part of filling some gaps that are tough. We've lost 40% of our funding for those things in the last 3 years. And so those are other pressures where at some point, I guess what I'd ask for is give us some of that money back to the federal government since you aren't doing the work. But we're still left with on-the-ground decisions that affect people daily in their lives. That's, I think, from the comments I've heard, what's making this commission think this through to see. So very cognizant of what you're talking about, but also where do those people suffer if we don't provide services, things. And I'm talking about some very basic things. I rode with policemen and could not believe the patience they would have for those people in difficulties and how they would try and get them back to a source of help without making their life tougher. They didn't necessarily have to do that, but I think the city has very much a conscience about that and is concerned about how we're losing federal funding. We send them the money. They take their cut out. They don't give us anything back. And I don't know how that becomes fair either. We're left with facing the public, as you did, facing the public with needs, but no funds to do it with. We're going to talk about another subject where that's being, in the next phase of this agenda, another subject where these things affect the people that we're talking about. So thank you for your comment.
Can I ask you a question? I'm out of town. You talked about the crime rate, and then you talked about the need for 2 officers per 1,000.
That's a national standard. That's not necessarily where we're going to go.
Okay, that's what I wondered is where are we nationally standard on crime rate, and do we need to try to build that based on our crime rate? maybe we could just do 7 officers this year or something, you know? I
Well,
don't know.
we're so far behind doing 10, we're still 33 behind the average now. Doesn't mean we're gonna go there. That's, Mr. Atkinson has talked to us about, this probably gets us to a point we can see how our response is, watch our, they have things, objective things they look at, response time, follow-up time, all sorts of indicators that you'd see with the county, with the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
So we'll certainly watch those.
Yeah. At the end of the meeting when that public, I wanted to come back and visit with you about the drainage fee, but I'll do that real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you. Anyone else, please? This input is really important to us, so thank you. Anyone else would like to comment? Any commissioners would like to add comments to the public hearing? If not, we'll close the public hearing. And the city attorney, that basically ends this discussion. We don't have to do anything in this item. That's correct. Okay, thank you. Number 3, resolution opposing the proposed Texas Department of Transportation state-owned road turnback program. This resolution expresses the city of Amarillo's opposition to the proposal by the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, to turn back, in quotation marks, since 1,900 miles of state-owned roads to cities and counties. The resolution further expresses the city's opposition to the resulting unfunded mandated financial burden of the Amarillo residents. I'd open this to comments from the commissioners about this. We'd love to have somebody comment back in response to what we're saying. We talked about this in our work session, and what they're proposing, and I think one of the comments that I heard is very important, is this isn't a turn back. We never had those. How can they turn us back something we never had? And how can they do it when they keep our money in their pocket down there and don't put it back in our coffers? And after they take the funds to administer in the very least, and all they're doing is ministering us into more debt. Any other commissioners who would like to comment?
Well, it's another one of those items that the legislature, well, not the legislature, but that this commission, TxDOT, had a shortfall. They didn't get all the money they wanted, and so way to do that, of course, they implicitly say that's not the case. But they're wanting to turn back roads that are state-maintained roads to different communities, and guess who's going to be shouldering that $165 million shortfall if it goes back to different communities? And if you stop and think about it, in Amarillo, it would be like Amarillo Boulevard, it would be Sonsi Road, it would be T. Anchor Boulevard, all of Western. Those are state-maintained highways. Washington from Freeway South. So they're going to be having a meeting to discuss these items, and we're not the only ones affected. Whole communities across the state of Texas, and I think it's just hugely unfair to try to give this back to us, and we never owned it, and now they want to give it back to us. So we are hoping to have our voices heard in Austin this week, and so that's what it's about, and I'm sure you'll hear some more about this.
The state already charges us a fuel tax to take care of the roads, and they're not going to stop charging us a fuel tax, and they're not going to give us, Amarillo, the fuel tax. They're just going to keep the fuel tax and expect us to take care of the roads. So.
Now, these weren't state maintained, they were state owned roads, right? They have the deed to this road bed, right?
Yes.
Comments?
I think the thing speaks for itself.
When you're talking about economic growth, and our state goes to other states encouraging economic growth, and then doesn't have the wherewithal to support the roads that sustain economic growth, what in the world are they doing? I don't understand that. And then they put it back on the cities to deal with, and do it in a pretty flippant manner. If you read the letters from the state, it ain't a very good sales job in my mind. I'm not buying their program. I don't think anybody here is. I'd enjoy to hear some public comment about this as we open this, just what your reaction is to this so far and what's happening. So if anybody would like to come forward, I'd really enjoy hearing it. I believe I'm going to head to Austin to make comment as a county judge is, and we'll see if we pass this resolution. But if you have any public comment that would help add to the comments we'll make down there, I would enjoy
Before we do that, I would like to add that the mayor in our executive session spoke about it, and the proposal is, and I think they've done it in one community, I just can't remember where it is, instead of repaving or resurfacing, they're turning them back into gravel roads. So that is the proposal for county roads, especially out, rural areas. Instead of keeping them up, they're just going to convert them to gravel roads.
When they turn them back from paved highways in the counties, they become the county's property, and then they have to maintain them. So somebody's built a nice place on a paved county road, and yet now heavy-duty trucks that are adding to economic development, gas and oil and agriculture, are wearing those roads out. To solve that problem, they're going to plow them up and turn them into gravel, so that the counties have to take care of those, and your county will also be charged to do that, because the state doesn't want to do it anymore. There's a lot of little things, devices in this. None of them are helping our pocketbook, and when you talk to us about what we're doing with our taxes, these are the kinds of things that affect our final decision, because they're forcing this back towards the cities, towards your pocketbook to do this. Yet they're not giving any of the money we've already given them to do this. So I adamantly oppose this. We'll take a vote on the resolution shortly. Comments, please.
I'd encourage you to pass the resolution, because that's irreprehensible that they would do that. Are they doing that because they're not receiving money from the federal government? Is that why the state? This is a state decision. That's the craziest thing I've heard of in a long time.
It's going to save them $162 million, and I would suggest from what Mr. Atkinson and I heard at a transportation seminar last year, that they're probably short in dealing with funds for highways and growth we've had in our state. Huge population, but they're probably short $3 billion. So this is a postage stamp on the envelope of fixing this. And the fact is, the state legislature and the governor need to fix this, yet they're saying that the state highway department has to find $1 million worth of savings in their budget. That was their mandate. So this is one of the results of that mandate. And I don't know, they're saying it isn't punitive, that there's no correlation. I'm having trouble sorting through that.
I'd have a hard time believing that. It sounds pretty punitive. The counties went out and bought right away, bought that land, and brought many of those roads up to a level, and then dedicated them back to the state, gave them to them for them to maintain. So that would be pretty bad for the state to turn around and say, now you paid for it already, now we're going to turn around and dump it.
Think about all the people that use those roads and our residents along there, or businesses that had a need for that and invested to make, because it was a nicer road. And now they're going to be left with a few more pots in their windshield and say nothing to the
Economic impact would be catastrophic in the state.
Yeah. Any other comments, please?
I'm Terry Harmon, 4809 Aberdeen. I recommend that you pass this resolution. This is just another symptom of what's going on in this nation. The federal passes it to the state to the city, and the city back to the people. We're at the bottom of the totem pole. 8% increase here. Every other entity has raised their tax rate. You know exactly how you felt when you saw what the Department of Transportation had done to you. It's exactly how we felt about the drainage fee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
David Cossey, 1014 Cimarron Canyon, soon to be Amarillo probably. I'm in negotiations on Potter County or Amarillo, but the kind of what the previous guy said, it seems like it's a symptom of government trying to do too much too quick. And he's right. AISD passed a bond measure that raised property taxes for who's in their district by who knows how much.
I think the voters passed that, correct?
Well, right. I mean, I'm saying that,
passed it.
right. They passed that, and definitely there's bond issues that are going to be put on the ballot this November that they have a right to pass or not.
Sure.
But there are issues that aren't votable that we've noticed lately, with not only a lot of issues going on downtown, but then other avenues of taxation. And it seems like the state's doing what, as he said, the federal government is doing with a lot of theirs. They're divesting themselves in a lot of their quote required duties. I spoke to a gentleman about some of the city-owned entities here that deal with code enforcement and other
Sir,
things.
I'm going to ask you to restrain your comments to the turnback program, that resolution, if you could center them on that, please.
Sure. So essentially, the turnback program in Texas, I would recommend turning back a lot of the city-owned entities back to the people of Amarillo.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I would move we approve this resolution proposing TxDOT's transportation state-owned road turnback program.
I second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Resolution approval of 2013-14 Amarillo Hospital District budget. This resolution approves the 2013-14 budget and associated programs and services of the Amarillo Hospital District. The budget is recommended for approval by the Amarillo Hospital District Board of Managers. Is there any questions about this item, any presentation, Mr. City Manager?
Mayor, the budget before you has been reviewed and approved by the Amarillo Hospital District Board of Managers. It's the same budget presented 2 weeks ago to you in your work session with no further changes. We do have a representative of the Hospital District Board, the Chair, here with us if you have any questions.
Dr. Bob Stafford is on that board. Michelle is there to back him up. Do you have any comments or anything at all that you would like to make? Okay, is there any questions from the audience about this item? Or from the commission? Not an entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the 2013-2014 Amarillo Hospital District budget.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the resolution approval of the 2013-14 Amarillo Hospital District budget. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Appointments to boards and commissions. Appointments are needed to the following boards: Quail Creek Public Improvement District and the Vineyards Public Improvement District. Do we have any nominations for those positions?
Mayor, it would be noted that the public improvement districts appoint their own members, and we approve their recommendations. For the Quail Creek Public Improvement District, we would like to recommend the reappointment of Chris Coe. For the Vineyards, Eric Nielsen, Thomas Nielsen, and Thomas Nielsen Jr. as reappointments to their board.
I second those nominations.
A motion and a second. Any discussion with the audience about these appointments from the commission? Not all those in favor of the appointments as stated by Commissioner Escajeda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Consent agenda. It's recommended the following items be approved. The city manager be authorized to execute all documents necessary for each transaction. A is the traffic signal parts accessory. B, the word truck washout affluent collection facility. C is the word of storm sewer erosion outfall control from McCarty Lake. B is the approval of agreement for transitional housing supported services. E is the approval agreement for permanent housing supported services. F, application for Texas Traffic Safety Program grants. G is the sale of property, and H is the approval of aviation clear zone easement. Are there any items that need to be removed for separate consideration by the commission? If not, I entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda as outlined.
A second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion about any of the items on the consent agenda? All those in favor of the consent agenda as proposed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Okay, this concludes the regularly scheduled agenda of the Amarillo City Commission. It's however customary at this time to allow citizens of this community with matters not on the agenda pertaining to city policy, programs, and services to speak to the commission. The floor is now open for that comment. We'll move back to executive session afterwards. We'll move back to executive session when these comments are concluded. Anyone would like to come forward and make a comment, please come forward.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is Bill Summerford, 6103 Blue Sage Circle, Amarillo, Texas. As you know, the City Commission voted against over 8,000 signers of two petitions a couple of weeks ago. One was the drainage fee, the other one was limiting the Amarillo city budget growth to population plus inflation. Pardon. Since that time, the city charter also provides that the initiative referendum committee can demand that those petitions be put to a vote by a majority quorum of the petitioners. That was provided to the city secretary. We heard nothing last week. Since we heard nothing last week, it is the city manager's job to ensure the city secretary does her job. We made the same demand to the city manager, yet we have heard nothing. My question to the city attorney is, does the city secretary have discretion, yes or no, to put that to a vote of the electors as provided by the city charter?
I would ask, Mr. Norris, would you like to answer that at this point, or?
Be glad to, Mayor. First of all, the letter was mailed to you yesterday afternoon. It started being get out to you last week. I was out of town for the last 3 days last week. But the letter was mailed to you yesterday in response to your 2 letters.
And what did it say, sir?
So I'm not going to go into that here. When you get your mail, if you want to call me, we'll talk about it. I'm not going to try to quote it or debate it here. In response to your direct question, no, the charter is clear that only the governing body and state law is clear that only the governing body can send a matter to the ballot. That's not up to any individual state person.
So you won't comment as to whether the city has discretion, or the city secretary has discretion or does not have discretion on the right for the petitioners to put it to a vote?
I'll speak correctly. I thought I did. I apologize if I was not clear. No. The city secretary is not the official who calls an election. You're asking the wrong question. She has no authority under state law or the charter to call an election. Only the governing body, the elected city commission, may call an election.
Okay, well, that's the reason I'm here today, because that was not made clear, and it's my understanding, just like you say, that there is no discretion of the city secretary. Thank you.
She doesn't call elections. There's no discretion because it doesn't even come to her desk. She has no right. You asked if she got discretion to call an election, and the answer is no, because she can't call an election whether she wanted to or not. Does that help?
That helps. That says there's no discretion to me. Thank you.
Any other comments, please? Welcome, sir.
My name is Walter Wolfram Jr. I live at 6714 West Hollywood Road. I'm an elected officer of the APW Local 114. As y'all are aware, there's a consolidation issue of trying to consolidate Amarillo and Midlands Mail into Lubbock, Texas. We've made some headway in our approaches to different folks. Senator Seliger has written a letter to U.S. Senator Cornyn to support the halting of this consolidation process. As we review these things, we're finding that there's no incentive for the U.S. Postal Service to do anything but do lip service and then to consolidate. They have never offered an alternative study to show that Amarillo has got 180,000 square feet of usable space up here to Lubbock's 50,000 square feet. They haven't even considered it. I think there's some motivation to go to Lubbock, but they've never really looked at Amarillo. And what I would like to see the City Commission do, in their wisdom, is to ask for an alternative study to look and see what it would be to bring Lubbock's mail to Amarillo. And as the delivery standards change, bring Midland's mail to Amarillo if consolidation is really necessary. We think that we need to leave these three cities alone, but there's no incentive for the U.S. Postal Service to leave the three cities alone, and this would give them an opportunity to have a reason to leave the three cities alone. And if they don't, then we have a chance of getting the mail up here. And what I would really like to see in 2014, when we have our Christmas cards out there, that I don't have a low cancellation on my Christmas cards. And I've provided, that's all I need, so I made up my time that over it went last time. Here's a copy of the new ad that we're going to put in the Amarillo Globe News.
You get it to the officer.
It's a one-page deal asking for support of our U.S. senators for this proposal. And Senator Cruz is going to be in the area this next week. I don't know if it's a public meeting or a private meeting. If it's a public meeting, we're going to address him also. So we would like you to think about doing that. I think it's to the city's best interest. I think it's to our best interest all around. Not only down in Lubbock and Midland also. These consolidation study needs to be stopped.
I need to refer this, if I could, to the city manager to resolve some questions. One of the questions I had was that under what you're talking about, wouldn't that be that they would close one or two in another place and not this one?
If they consolidate, we don't know exactly how the post office is going to consolidate. We've asked for information over 30 days ago, and they've never given it to us. We don't know if they're going to do a partial consolidation, we don't know if they're going to do a complete consolidation. We know that the city of Beaumont, the United States Postal Service came in, shut their plant completely down, did not move the equipment, told the employees they had until January 1 to find themselves another job. That city's gone.
I've heard that they would not end our postal mark, though, that it would only be on the metered mail.
The metered mail would come, that is metered like Pitney Bowes metered mail, that mail that you give through the business mail entry unit, would have whatever you put on it. What you will lose, you'll lose your postmark for the stamp mail, which will run about 125 to 150,000 pieces a day through the Postal Service cancellation process here in Amarillo. And at Christmas time, we run about 350,000 pieces a day. It will not have the Amarillo mark on it. It will have Lubbock's mark on it if they move to Lubbock. So you're actually moving the mail. If you have the meters, you get it. If you don't have the meters, you're going to get a Lubbock mark. So if my grandchild gives me a Christmas card, it'll have Lubbock, Texas on it.
Let's refer this to staff and see if we have enough information to deal with it from our part. None of us want to see jobs lost in Amarillo. Certainly, if you would look at that, Mr. City Manager, maybe you can give us some advice and maybe work with Mr. Wolfram to get a conclusion of the discussion. Thanks for your efforts. Anyone else, please?
This is the real reason I came today, was to talk about the drainage fee. It's really affected our outreach center, mainly because of the way it's administered. I'm not arguing the fact that you don't need the money, you don't need to fix the drainage. But the way that it happened was that it was based on parking lots and based on roof structure. Obviously, to help more people, we got to have a bigger building. We got to have the parking lot required by the city code enforcement to handle those people. I really thought initially, when I first heard about it, the city commission would make some exemptions for nonprofits. We don't have a product that we sell. Everything we have, we just give away. And it's becoming harder and harder, as you said. The federal government cut any kind of funding. In fact, for the last 3 years, we don't receive any government funding. We're self-funded by individuals, but it's becoming harder and harder to even acquire food. The drainage fee affected all the way down. It's a chain reaction that affected us several $100s a month. And it basically takes food right out of the people that we're trying to help, because that's less money than we have to give to the food bank, who, by the way, has to pay the drainage fee. Then you have on the county side, I think Potter County's fee before I left office was $50,000 a year. So they decided when they were looking at raising taxes, so now they're going to do tax increase to cover that. So it's like citizens get hit on the tax side on the city, get hit on the county side. Grocery stores now have to increase the cost of goods and services. And once again, the people at the bottom who are suffering, who struggle to buy, a basket full of food, are the ones that get hit the hardest. you know, I really don't have a problem with the drainage fee on my own personal property. I mean, it's not a huge amount, but when you have a facility that covers a city block, and by the way, none of the water at Cornerstone Outreach Center runs on the city. It all runs into the state drain system on the Dumas Highway. So we're paying money to the city, but it's not water the city has to even deal with. So I really wish that the commission would, and I signed the petition just for that reason, because it just kind of went against the grain. Because we're worried so hard to help people, it was kind of a slap in the face rather than a partnership. And I would like for the commission just to really look at some exemptions in some areas so we could help the people that we're trying so desperately to help. And, you know, if we got business, we had goods and services, we can increase the price, and all of a sudden, we don't have that. I think there are churches, a lot of groups that they're trying to help, so I'd like for y'all to consider that.
I'd like to refer that to City Manager too. We had a lot of this discussion in public meetings, but if there's any update we need, would you give that to us, please?
Mayor, there's been no change relative to the exemptions. The state law, other than exempting themselves, did provide a few alternatives. Discussions at the time, discussions at the public meeting ultimately led to the decision that due to any exemption that's granted becomes in a cost shift to some other category that's not exempted. This body chose not to grant any.
Thank you.
May I say one thing?
Sir.
I learned something I didn't know, and I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Talking about that. You brought up a couple ones I was not aware of.
Yeah, thanks.
The drainage in the state right away. Yeah, incorrect.
Well, but that, I would ask a correction, because that isn't quite what I understand. Mr. City Manager?
I'd have to look at one of the maps. I think entirely correct. It enters into the state system, which then dumps the water back into our system.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. We had it checked
We
out.
wish they had their own lake and things, but they'd probably give it back to us, turn it back to us, so we'd have to take care of it anyway.
Yeah, based on where your facility is and where I know the water.
It does go, it probably would go into the storm city. I don't know if it would go into Thompson Park, but that does make its way out to the
It's right back into the city.
It does.
city, but then it goes back to the state at the Canadian
But it's
River.
water that we have to handle to get
They
back.
exempted themselves. They exempted themselves.
So I don't know, you know, if you can't grant an exemption, maybe the city can make donations back to.
Commissioner,
Put it in the
we
budget.
probably need to go to the next person. Okay, thank you. We had this consideration a long time. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robert Tolliver, 4400 Southwest 3rd Avenue in Amarillo. I would like to reiterate something that the previous speaker made reference to, and that is that nonprofits, especially churches in this case, are not exempt from the drainage fee. I too learned something new in that it seems as though Amarillo Boulevard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is pretty much state property, because they're wanting to turn that back to us.
Well, that's not on the list to turn back, but it could be if we capitulate.
Okay. All of West Hills water drains down to West Hills Park and goes through the culvert down across the highway through Stanley March's property down in his lake and down to the Tascosa Country Club. Also, what goes into that same system, drainage system, is the Amarillo Country Club's water. Now, you know I have a real issue with the country club and the fact that the city cannot regulate their use of water from their water wells. But I am here to tell you, and I have photographs, Commissioner Green may or may not have seen some of them, there is water almost on a constant daily basis running through the culverts at Tascosa Road, down across 3rd Avenue into the park drainage system. The erosion that has been created from that and other, I will say, incomplete, and please don't take ill-conceived, not well-engineered drainage into consideration from the country club or West Hills for the volume of water. You go out there and look at the culverts and you'll see what I mean. My church is a small and struggling church, and we do help outreach. Not being exempt and going into something other than the city's stormwater drain system, our water bill has increased $87 a month. Now, for a small church, that is an awful lot of money that we could be putting into outreach to help feed the homeless and start back some feeding programs that would help augment the weekend backpacks that are given to children. So maybe the city can find a way to either give back some of those fees from nonprofits that are definitely not affected and go into the city system, or give us some sort of incentives, something. It just seems unjust to tax a nonprofit organization.
Mr. Mayor, can I just mention something? I would invite you to go walk through West Hills Park right now. The drainage that has been eroded is being fixed, and that's being fixed by the city through the drainage utility fee money that's come back through. So please go see. It's very impressive what's happening there.
Are they going to work farther toward the south? Because that's where the majority of damage is taking place. And I have seen the little things.
Yeah,
little tractors.
I think one of the points of this whole drainage thing through all the discussion that I heard was trying to fix an ill-conceived age system that was established when we, in 1950, we had 115 miles of paved road surface drainage. In 2010, we had 919 miles of paved roads, surface drainage, some slight underground drainage. 3 years later, we have 115 more miles of paved roads in our city. That growth has caused, from 1995, these are what I recall, a study was done of what was needed to fix it. It was $55 million in work. That's gone to $67 million in work. And if we go back, you can look at it, but it's why we looked at something really had to deal with this. And again, there's no solution. It does fall back on our shoulders, and certainly we're aware of that, but we still maintain that while I don't drive down every street, I don't want them flooding, and I don't want the people at the end of those blocks, because I never drive down them, littering with that. And as the rain moves around this city, this old flat city, it's hard to predict where that will be. So we comprehensively, through the comprehensive plan and other things, and we had dozens of public meetings. Well, I've heard many comments as we have today against it. We heard a multitude of comments. Thank you. This should have been done. These from citizens. We had those public meetings. Thank you. This should have been dealt with a long time ago. The state didn't allow it a long time ago. We could not apply an enterprise type venture where the money collected has to go into a fund that can't be touched by some future commission with an agenda or not. It has to go to that specific work. And as we looked at this, we made the decision of sharing fairly and not exempting anyone other than the people mandated by the state. So those entities you talked about are paying into the drainage fee as well. I thank you, but we can't really get into it because it's not an agenda item, but I certainly have a discussion with you at another point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to comment, please?
David Cossey, 1014 Cimarron Canyon. Definitely not going to talk to the drainage fee because under state law that does have a lot of questionability and stuff. But the limited government petition that you were submitted, and unfortunately the gentleman that's counseling me on this, I wasn't able to fly in. The act of calling an election is a ministerial act. And under the city charter, and I'm going to get to a statement of fact question on my statements here. The city charter requires when a completed petition is filed with valid signatures, for the city secretary to propose that to the city commission to consider an election. Under the city charter, there's no exemption for calling a city election on the basis of concerns with the potential of state law. And I would bring into the question, there's actually some case law backing this. Colson versus the City Council of Victoria that deal with something exactly like this. The City Council's duty is clear, and its compliance with the law is a ministerial act in nature. The City Council's refusal to submit the proposed changes to the vote of the people thwarts only not the legislative mandate, but the will of the people. And they also went on to further state that the election is the determinant of whether or not there's a justiciable issue at hand. The drainage fee is exempted under state law from a vote of the people. And we would recommend, just like the bond issues and others, an additional tax, put it to the vote. But the limited government, due to the vagueness of that petition, which actually doesn't require any direct act on the city, is a votable petition. In the case of the Colson, and then also dealing with another one that actually came to Amarillo, In-Ray Roof in Addison, went to the 14th District in Houston, and reference to that was Robert Green versus the City of Lubbock. That was actually voted on by the Court of Appeals here in Texas, here in Amarillo, determined that any valid petitions under the requirements of the charter, so long as the state doesn't explicitly exempt them from being voted on, must be voted on, and then after that vote, it's determined of whether or not it's legal. So then the courts come into the case. By not putting it to the vote, you're actually denying, I would say 8,000 if there's two petitions, but in this case, probably 4,000 people their rights to vote on something. Supreme Court just ruled that when a city, a state, or a federal government has a ministerial act to do something, and they deny it, they deny their action, that omission, then they're also going to be possibly in violation of the First Amendment based on that case. So it's going to be directly based on that case. So the drainage fee, I will concede, unfortunately, that there's no question it can't go to the vote if you don't decide it is. That's the purview of you as commissioners. Limited government, due to its vagueness, I think you're denying the First Amendment rights of a lot of people.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Mr. City Attorney, we sent the initiators of the petition a letter within the month after they filed that initiation, and it referred to things that we had very real concerns about how this would be going, correct?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. That letter was dated January 29, 2013, and went to Mr. Summerford, members of the Initiative Committee. That letter indicated, outlined our legal concerns, the legal, and this is the first commenter, Mr. Causey is the first person who's beginning to get it, that the charter does not exist in a vacuum. You must go all the way back to the Texas Constitution. You begin with the premise that the Texas Constitution is the superior law in our state. The Texas Constitution says no right under a charter can conflict with the general laws of our state. Period. End of it. The Texas Supreme Court, which is higher than the ones you've mentioned thus far, the Texas Supreme Court has ruled that even a broad right of referendum or initiative under a city charter is nonetheless a limited right, and that a charter provision giving initiative and referendum cannot be used to place an election into a process that state law does not allow an election. And there, neither Mr. Summerford's ever come to my office to talk. I always want to do it here at the microphone. Mr. Causey's never come to my office to talk. I'm not going to give legal advice or into an extended debate in this kind of a meeting. This is your meeting.
Sir.
That's what courts are for. If we need to have a debate about this,
Sir.
let's go do it the right opinion. But we did send a letter yesterday trying one more time to lay out our understanding of the law to the best of our ability, the advice we have received and the decisions you have made comply with the rulings of the Texas Supreme Court in this area. And it is not new law. It is law that has existed in Texas since the turn of the last century. The limitations on the power of initiative and referendum, and no charter can conflict with the general law of this state, whether it's in terms of the creation or dissolution of the drainage utility, or whether it is the laws that just dictate how a budget is determined. That is an inappropriate area for initiative and referendum to enter in. And reasonable minds can differ. If you want to go hire another lawyer and he has another opinion, let's get it on.
Well, and Mr. City Attorney, we actually did that. We hired an attorney to see if we were being myopic. We were just looking at the city's point of view.
Well, that's a good point, Mayor. Again, I'm a citizen of this city. I pay taxes. I'm a voter in this city. I pride myself on my professionalism, but I also am humble enough to acknowledge I'm a human being. And so I was willing to submit my work to be graded by an out-of-town attorney, someone who has no vested right, no interest in the politics here, who's not a voter, who's not a taxpayer, an attorney who has current experience in representing other cities on initiative and referendum issues, and he concurs in the election.
You also stated to us the history of this city in recognizing petitions that were presented.
Well, it's true, Mayor. Again, the city, it's somewhat insulting to think that we don't know how the process works. 8 times in the last decade, citizens have gathered correct petitions on matters of general policy and governance, which were duly presented, duly turned down by the city commission and was sent to the ballot box. This city has a track record of sending proper initiatives and referendums. And the fact that someone disagrees with prior Supreme Court precedent, I can't change that against them. But it's my duty to advise you in accordance with those precedents.
Without giving them legal advice, you certainly explain this in detail.
I would do the best I can within my ethical duty to this organization. My client is this organization, and I cannot coach someone how to sue my organization.
They also do have an attorney from their standpoint, correct?
Sure.
Okay. For themselves. But the point is that we take this as a very serious issue and was dealt with in a very prescribed way.
We've studied it at length, wanted to do the right thing in this matter.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, did you have a comment? This is a very important issue to us. We don't want to deny anybody's right to pursue things that we haven't. So we thank you, sir.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify, since you mentioned the Colson decision was a Supreme Court decision. Okay. And they granted mandamus relief in that case. So that'll be what would be sought in this case.
You know, I've lost cases.
Right.
Won cases I thought I had won. I've lost. I've lost cases I thought I had won.
Right.
So I have no ego tied up in the game. We have studied the law. We've advised our client. Our client has acted.
Right.
And if we want to go to the courthouse, well, let's go see someone else.
I'd rather not. I mean, that's the whole point of the First Amendment, is that we don't have to go through the courts.
Obviously, we would too. Thank you, sir, for your comments. Is there anyone else that has a comment today, please? Well, thank you very much for your participation. We got some great comments today. We will go back to executive session. Thank you for being here.